If you've got a lawn, then I'd wager there's an 85% chance that you've got the same problem that I have in this lawn right here. Vast majority of people who own lawns and care about how they look will cut them and they'll water them. But what they don't do is they don't run a scarifying blade, a hard-tine dethatcher over the lawn to break up the thatch layer and help it decompose faster. Literally one of the most common problems that homeowners, yard owners ask me about is why their lawns feel spongy, why they feel too soft. We definitely want a soft lawn. We don't want it to feel like a rock. But once it gets to be too spongy, then it starts to be a problem. In almost all cases where the lawn isn't just a swampy mess of mud, that sponginess is a thatch layer that has gone overboard. I'm not talking about the surface debris, the grass clippings and tree material that falls and accumulates on the ground. I'm talking about the actual thatch, the fibrous, almost woody-like material that's underneath your grass blades. If you ever cut your grass too low, it starts having all that brown tinge to it. Those are the stems to your grass. Scalped grass doesn't look good because we expose the stems. Stems are part of that problem because when they die off and they get replaced by new stems, new grass systems that are growing up, they don't break down as much. The same thing with dead stolons and the overaccumulation of underground rhizomes that have died off and been replaced by new rhizomes. Just like when hair falls off of your head because it dies and just falls off for whatever reason, new hair is always growing. The same thing is happening to our grass. This is shedding, root shedding, rhizome shedding. And to get ever so slightly technical on you, the stems, stolons, rhizomes, all of those stemmy materials have something called lignin in them. Lignin is part of the leaf tissue as well. However, in the stems, roots, rhizomes, the lignin content is 4, sometimes 5 times as great as it is in the leaf material. And here's the kicker. Lignin resists decomposition. So if your lawn is thick and healthy, then that means it's most likely growing more aggressively. And if you're accumulating too much lignin in that layer above the soil and below the leaf canopy, it's not going to decompose as fast. And then the roots are going to start growing into that space. And then as they shed and get replaced by new roots and new rhizomes, that layer gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and everything continually gets harder and harder to decompose, adding to the thickness and the sponginess, the soft bounciness of the lawn. In time, everything that we want in the soil starts growing in that layer of thatch. And the only way to alleviate this problem is to purposefully attack it through maintenance, regular maintenance. Just like you own a lawnmower, get yourself a dethatcher with a hard tine blade. Many people use the Sunjo unit. I prefer the Von Haus unit. I've used it here on this channel a number of times. Both of these are fairly inexpensive machines that you can buy on Amazon. I've never literally seen any of them sold in a store nearby, but if you don't want to shop on Amazon, I'm sure there's other stores online that sell them as well. For a more aggressive machine, you go off to your local tool rental agency and you purchase, or you don't purchase, you rent a vertical cutter or a vertimower or a scarifier. However it's labeled, it's all basically the same thing. They just need to have these hard tine blades that run up and down, the circular, and they cut into the ground. The reason that this is important is because it scores the thatch layer, digs roughly 1/4 to a 1/2 inch into the soil below the leaf canopy, allowing extra moisture, allowing extra oxygen to get down into that area so that we can stimulate additional breakdown of the material by the actual natural microorganisms that are living in the lawn, the stuff that decomposes, the stuff that's supposed to be decomposing this stuff. If the thatch layer is waterlogged, then you have an anaerobic environment and it's not going to break down. If it's dried out because the thatch layer dries out faster than the soil does, then the microorganisms are also not going to be breaking down that thatch layer. Physically cutting into the lawn with these blades going in a vertical kind of up and down, I don't know, it's like a bike wheel turning over on a sidewalk, except for it's digging into the ground like a circular saw. You need those cuts in the lawn to be able to manage your thatch layer. Now here on this lawn, I've been managing it for the past 6 months or so, trying to improve it without doing a major overhaul, just to show how it's done. This lawn is not complete. There's still a lot of problems with it. One of those problems is the growing thatch layer. Parts of the lawn that are the thickest are getting to the point where it's so thick that I can't use my reel mower over it anymore because it bounces and floats across the surface because it's getting too spongy. It's too thick. So to combat this, I'm going to go ahead and use my scarifying blade over the lawn and cut it as short as I possibly can after I've done that. This is basically thinning out the lawn. It's just like there are trees over here that every now and then, or the bushes over here, every now and then you got to thin them out to keep them healthy. Now, why do I say roughly 85% of people have this problem? I say that because most grass types will generate this problem with a few exceptions. Lignin content of leaf material, just leaf material in all grasses, is very low. That's why when we cut the grass, it decomposes very quickly. It's not the main problem. This is not the problem that causes thatch. So grass types that are predominantly leaf-based, so your perennial rye and your fescues, these kinds of things, we cut them and we never really cut the stems off. There's no roots or rhizomes or stolons to deal with. It's all basically leaf material that we're cutting off. Now, tall fescues do have quite a bit of lignin in their stems, but because we don't cut tall fescue low, we're never really cutting the stems off. We're truly only cutting the leaves, and that's why we don't have to dethatch these things or cut these little slits into the lawn. In the warm season grass categories, a handful of the grasses don't have rhizomes. They grow primarily based off of stolons. St. Augustine comes to mind. Buffalo grass comes to mind. But here in this lawn, this is a mixture of Bermuda grass and kikuyu grass. Both of these grasses grow very aggressively through above ground stolons, which are high in lignin, and underground rhizomes. If I cut all of those stolons and just destroy the stoloniferous kind of growth on top of this lawn, it's not going to kill the lawn because all of the rhizomes and the roots underground are still going to be alive and healthy. And the grass is going to grow right out of the ground and repair itself very quickly. So if you run any warm season grass that has rhizomes and stolons, you're going to want to do this process. If you were to go ahead and take a dethatcher over a St. Augustine lawn, for instance, where that doesn't have these underground rhizomes, you're really going to be inflicting more damage than the vast majority of St. Augustine lawns need. It's not going to be nearly as helpful as if you were doing this on something like a Bermuda lawn or a zoysia lawn. And up north in the cool season territory, if you're running Kentucky bluegrass, all of those rhizomes that run side to side just underneath the soil surface, as they die off and get replaced by new rhizomes, that dead layer of rhizomatic material starts getting thicker and thicker and thicker, and eventually the roots start growing into it, and that thatch layer starts from underground and kind of pushes itself up. That's not probably the best way to describe it, but that's how I envision it in my head. Creeping bent grass, creeping red fescue, these are other grass types up north, up in the cool season territory, that are also going to be spreading laterally by stolons and rhizomes. It's very common to have Kentucky bluegrass mixed in with tall fescue, mixed in with perennial rye. And once you throw in fine fescue, creeping red fescue into the mix that has the stolons and the rhizomes, you can end up getting a very dense thatch layer in these northern lawns as well. All right, it's later in the afternoon now. I've done everything kind of along the paved surfaces, which is where there's the paved surface that way. These are the worst areas, the worst offenders in my yard right now. Everything along the side is where the bulk of the kikuyu is in this lawn. A lot of the Bermuda in here is actually fairly young. It really kind of came out of dormancy mid to late spring and surprised me with how much Bermuda was actually in this lawn. It's probably more Bermuda than kikuyu. So the Bermuda isn't really thick, it's the kikuyu that is the problem. That's where all the sponginess is. So now you see we got a lot of brown stem material showing, some of the dirt underneath. I really kind of made this area right here look a lot worse than it did earlier today. But I'm confident that within another week or so, a lot of this stem is going to put on new leaf material and it's going to be a lot less squishy and bouncy. And the actual dirt showing in between the blades is going to fill back in pretty quickly. Overall, the entire lawn is going to perform better over the course of the rest of the summer and going into the fall. I'll certainly have more things that I need to do to this lawn to make it look its very best, but all of that will come in future videos. With my ridiculous hat on, hat cover here, protect my neck, watch this video up here about fixing thatch in the lawn. This is just a 3-minute video. It shows you how to fix it. I have longer, more substantial, much more detail-packed videos out there. But for those of you new to the concept of getting rid of thatch in the lawn, watch this video next.